Greetings. This presentation will be discussing Edgar Allan Poe's life and how it led to the creation of his artworks. Every artist creates art for a purpose, sometimes multiple purposes, but typically art is made to provoke a particular feeling for the consumer that the artist has felt before, and hopefully create a new window into that person's life as an elevated form of communication. Edgar Allan Poe, a renowned poet of dark romanticism, writes very macabre stories and poems. This begs the question, what could Poe possibly experience in his life to be able to express himself in such a way in his art? Edgar Allan Poe's lifelong struggles evidently gave rise to themes of death, madness, and psychological tension, which is a clear evidence that his art served as an emotional outlet for his trauma. Poe's life was incredibly unforgiving from the very beginning. He sadly lost his parents at the age of 3 and was then taken in by the Allan family. The members of the Allan family, especially his father, Josh Allan, were very distant and emotionally tense, which often led to fissures in his mental state. These experiences of familial destruction can be represented by some of Poe's literary works as well, such as The Fall of the House of Usher, where the narrator attends a house that crumbles and erodes along with the cursed family inside. Not only is there a clear connection to his degenerative familial life, but there's also another point. The manor was, of course, once beautiful, but that beauty is not to be seen by the narrator for reasons that are completely outside of his control. Much like Poe's adopted childhood, he was unable to experience a truly healthy family because of factors outside of his grasp, such as the death of his original parents and his chosen adopted family being the way that they were. Poe's transition into adulthood was riddled with financial disparities, a problem stemming once again from Josh Allan. When Poe was accepted at the University of Virginia, Josh Allan refused to provide adequate funds to support his education through his inheritance, leaving Poe destitute. Poe also attempted to begin a military career out of poverty, but his endeavor also collapsed when he was dismissed for purposely neglecting his duties because Allan refused to allow him to leave the military honorably. Poe's experiences of feeling trapped by circumstances beyond his control are very much represented in stories like The Telltale Heart and The Black Cat. In both of these tales, the protagonists spiral downwards because of trivial matters that they notice in their lives due to some mental instability. This obsession creates an inescapable collapsing feeling of helplessness and a lack of control for the narrators, leading themselves to harm other people or themselves. This is a clear outpour of Poe's experience with his father, as any venture in his life was struck down by Allan or by other factors by life outside of his control. We can also see some violent tendencies in the endings of these stories, which could even suggest that Poe often felt the need to become violent around Josh Allan through anger. By far, the most artistically impactful and, of course, horrible situation of all for Poe was the repeated and sudden loss of women in his life whom he loved dearly. The most traumatic of these losses was his wife, Virginia Clem, or after their marriage, was known as Virginia Poe. Poe thought the world of her, but she was sadly diagnosed with consumption at a very young age, which was lethal and incurable at the time. The slow and painful decline of her health, while she was still alive, had a devastating emotional effect on Poe, even while she was still alive, as Poe had to anxiously come to terms with her death before she even passed. This meant that Poe had to become very well acquainted with death, and the concept of death of a beloved woman is possibly Poe's most famous subject. Writings such as Annabel Lee, Lenore, and The Raven all describe the premature death of a female figure and the pain and suffering that is left in the death's wake. In particular, The Raven is a clear one-to-one of Poe's experience of Virginia, where a crow looms atop the door of a dreaming man, incessantly tapping and pecking and cawing. This is a clear representation of Virginia's sickness, as his anxiety for her condition before her death slowly ate or pecked at his mental state. This is also mirrored by the quote, "From my books, surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, name is here forevermore." This was written to express his feelings about the impending loss of Virginia and how that loss would completely uproot all that he held dear. Interestingly, The Raven was also written during the time that Virginia was grappling with tuberculosis and her death was impending, while Lenore and Annabel Lee which were stories that are much more aligned with sudden grief and death specifically, were written almost directly after, which really gives us a clear insight into Poe's mental state over the course of Virginia's death throughout his art. Edgar Allan Poe's life was almost entirely defined by adversity and pain, including early orphanhood, devastating emotional turmoil, and the excruciating slow loss of his beloved wife. These horrible experiences influenced his writing immensely, as his art was a direct reflection of his mental state. But in the end, Poe's legacy clearly shows that art is a great way to express both internal anguish and external struggle. Poe may have struggled and clawed his way through life tooth and nail, but his writing made something beautiful of it. And now, people can feel and understand the anguish that he went through long after his death. In other words, Poe will never be truly alone like he often was in life ever again, as people can now connect with him much longer after his death.